We're prepared, for example, to indemnify the project against any financial loss that derives from Premier Horgan's attempts to delay or obstruct the project.
I'm doing what I said I would do. I'm defending the interests of British Columbia.
That if the path forward for the pipeline through BC is not settled soon, I am ready and prepared to turn off the taps.
Still three players, but the game has changed a bit. Bill Morneau is now putting taxpayer dollars where the government's mouth is. Morneau, Horgan and Notley all spoke on Wednesday, all digging in for a long fight, or a fight at least that's going to last another couple weeks. Every week for this, we on Facebook and Twitter, we put out this at issue in 60 seconds. Tonight, we have at issue in 6 minutes. You can thank the Royal Wedding for that. Chantal Hébert is in Montreal. Andrew Coyne is in Toronto. And we've just got the two of you because 6 minutes is plenty of time for the two of you. Let me start with you, Andrew. What did you make of that move by the federal government this week to, I don't know what they were trying to do, force Kinder Morgan's hand, signal that they were coming to an end, put pressure on Horgan? How did you interpret that?
Maybe a bit of all those things, including not just reassuring Kinder Morgan, but also letting them know that they think they've got options in case Kinder Morgan walks away. The problem, of course, is they've boxed themselves in to a certain extent. They boxed themselves partly because the Prime Minister, prior to the election, went around legitimizing opposition to the pipelines by saying people had to have social license, or that implying that Aboriginal groups had not just a right to be consulted, but some kind of veto. And then when they allowed Energy East to go under and they killed off Northern Gateway, they're left with just this one pipeline, which they've now declared they have to get built. I think in the circumstances, they're doing what they have to do. They've got, Kinder Morgan's make it very clear they have to give them some kind of assurance that they're not going to have the value of their investment essentially expropriated by the government of BC. This is only the first step, however. There's lots of other things they've got to deal with. They've got to deal with existing Aboriginal court challenges, and they've got to deal with the protesters on the ground.
Chantal, what did you make of that move?
Well, we already knew that the government was willing to put taxpayers' money on the table since the Prime Minister said as much after meeting with the premiers a month ago. So what I learned from Bill Morneau's news conference was that he had yet to manage to convince Kinder Morgan that there was enough money on the table and that the project was worth pursuing. Putting pressure on Premier Horgan, I don't think so, frankly, because BC's course is fairly clear. They have gone to court, and until the court responds to their reference, nothing much is going to happen to their position. So you're not going to get a resolution that has BC on board or passive by the end of this month. And beyond that, I think that the federal government was mostly trying to fill the frame to say, we are doing something, we're working on this.
So if 2 weeks passes, and May 31st is the deadline, the self-imposed deadline, I guess, that Kinder Morgan has given itself, 2 weeks passes and Kinder Morgan walks away, could the federal government then legitimately say, Andrew, we have done everything we can. If no one else comes to the table, we tried to get a new pipeline, but we're out of luck? And would that be acceptable? Would that be good enough?
It certainly wouldn't be acceptable to Alberta. And I don't think that it would happen that way. I think one way or another, somebody's going to step up. I think the government of Alberta has said that. So hopefully it's Kinder Morgan, from my point of view. Hopefully it remains a private sector solution. But there are governments in the mix, and there are governments that are determined to see this pipeline built. I should say the other shoe that still has to drop is federal legislation. Clarifying, one hopes, the jurisdictional questions here and giving some instruction to the courts in that regard. And if they're successful in that, and if they can head off BC's delaying tactics, they may never have to pay this indemnification. This is insurance, in other words. If they're not successful, if BC does manage to delay it and add a lot of costs, then they'll have to pay out, which I hope will then get recouped from the government of BC. But if they are successful, then this is all just insurance.
And is it worthwhile insurance, Chantal, in terms of what taxpayers' money should be used for?
That's really hard to say. There's a political bill that might have to be paid for this. Polls show that a majority of Canadians, not necessarily a huge majority in BC, believe this pipeline should be built, but it also shows that a lot of voters are wondering why the federal government would be putting public funds in a private project. That being said, about the federal legislation thing, you, like me, know that the clock is running out on the spring session, and Parliament is about to adjourn for the summer. So getting legislation adopted in both houses of Parliament is hardly a done deal. And even if it were, I'm sure it would provide extra instructions to the courts, but I don't see how it would stop BC from pursuing a reference. The BC government is perfectly entitled, as would any other provincial government, to ask its top court for advice on an issue.
And is that ultimately where this is going to get decided then, Andrew? Is it, I mean, perhaps there'll be a deal and that's fine, but it will be court decisions that decide whether this happens or not, will it not?
That's right. But again, does the federal legislation, first of all, does it have an impact on the BC court reference? It may well, in terms of their deliberations. And secondly, does it give some assurance to Kinder Morgan when they're looking at this very murky future that maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that maybe at the end of the day they'll actually get this through, even if it's not, absolutely cut and dried by May 31st. It's going to be up to them. Do they feel that they've got sufficient assurance by that point?
Okay, I got to leave it there. Thank you both for the 6-minute version. You did well. Good news for all of you who love politics as much as we do and want more than 6 minutes. At Issue is also a podcast. You get what we talked about here tonight, but you also get extra. This week's extra, the name Stephen Harper has been resurrected, at least by himself. What does that mean for Andrew Scheer and anything else? Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational.